Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Put Me In Coach, I'm Ready to Scale podcast. I am your host, Eugene Terk. On this show, we cut through the noise to bring you practical ideas, real world experiences, and actionable insights from business coaches and growth minded leaders who are in the trenches every day. We aren't just talking about big ideas. We're talking about execution and hopefully helping you master leadership, alignment, accountability, and strategy to successfully scale your business. As a reminder, each and every episode is brought to you by Align, the strategic planning and execution software designed to keep your team focused on what matters most. From KPI dashboards to daily huddles, Align helps you create clarity and drive consistent execution. As a listener of the podcast, you can get 10% off of your new subscription. Just head over to aligntoday.com to sign up for an introductory demo and be sure to use promo code podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. And now let's jump into today's conversation. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Put Me In Coach, I'm Ready to Scale podcast. As always, I am your host, Eugene Terk. Hope everyone is having a great day, a great week, and thank you so much for joining us. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Dr. Craig Overmyer. Craig is a scaling up coach, but has had a long history in helping organizations grow and scale. Craig, it's always great to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's an honor, Eugene, to be with you and support the work you're doing. And our job is to help those owners, maybe founders and executive leadership teams to find their way to scale up, have more time, more fun, more money.
I
So that's
get
all.
it. Those are three fabulous things to strive for. Craig, why don't we start by just giving you an opportunity to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your journey, what brought you to coaching, and sort of the things that you bring to coaching clients that you work with.
Yeah, thank you. So I met Vern Harnish in 2007. I got a phone call from him to participate in a scaling up certification program that was just starting. He had been at an EO conference in Indianapolis, Indiana, where he spoke, and he asked those entrepreneurs who would be a coach that he might want to know, and my name came up from several folks. I served as a pastoral counselor and marriage and family therapist, and a lot of my clients were actually entrepreneurs. So before there was coaching, there was therapy. And so I continued to use that brand because that's how I was known. I worked at St. Vincent Hospital, but I specialized in working with family businesses in the transition from one generation to the next. And so I became a certified coach in 2007, mainly have been working in Indianapolis, serving some amazing clients. One of them that I have been working with since 2010, Kittle Property Group, serves about 50,000 folks who want affordable housing. And I helped Jeff Kittle scale since 2010, so it's a long-term engagement. He's on the board for Crew Carwash. Crew Carwash last year was through Glassdoor voted to be the second best place to work in the country, competing with NVIDIA, Lilly, and big companies like that. They have about 2,000 employees, I think 56 locations. And this year they were voted to be the best place to work in the country. So I've had
And,
the honor of working with some iconic cultures. They're not the kind of giant cultures that, like HP or how those started. But nevertheless, the mid-market is who I serve. And now I'm focused as a CEPA, Certified Exit Planning Advisor, to help those founders and business owners and leadership teams to increase the business valuation. And they mainly do that by increasing the three intangible capitals, the human capital, social capital, which is then our brand in the marketplace, structural capital, systems, processes, and procedures, and then customer capital. So my job is to continue to work with those mid-market firms and to help them to understand how to build a culture that really works. So that's a quick summary of my history.
Awesome. And I'll give you an early congratulations on what will be next year, your 20th anniversary of coaching. That's a really
Yeah, thank you.
fabulous achievement. I know that one of the things that's really sort of near and dear to your heart, as a matter of fact, you wrote a book called Accelerate Through Conflict, and that is sort of helping organizations get through conflict in order to help them grow and scale. Craig, I know that most business leaders probably look at office conflict as a sign that something is broken. Why do you argue, I think, that productive conflict is actually an essential tool for scaling up rather than a problem that needs to be fixed?
So I trust a couple of resources. In the Rockefeller Habits Checklist, the first habit that Vern Harnish has been publicizing and promoting is the executive team is healthy and aligned. And when you look at the four bullets, they understand each other's styles. They have regular weekly meetings, and they understand, get educated every month. But the fourth bullet is that they can debate. Once and often there are friends at work. You want to have friends. Gallup says you should have a best friend, but sometimes friendship can be a barrier to having those what I have termed in the moment conversations, where we address issues and debate. So healthy debate, healthy conflict, being able to address issues. And I've coined the term in the moment conversations, but actually I got permission to use that term. One of my clients was a regional director at Burgeon Hill. They provide some amazing multifamily housing. And she was talking about a maintenance guy with a property manager. And she said, you know, Dr. O, they just don't know how to have an in the moment conversation. So say that again. Yeah, an in the moment conversation. Address the issue right away because they were avoiding the conflict. They have fear of conflict. They didn't trust each other to share the ideas. And so uh, I got permission from her to use that term. And so in the book, I just basically help reframe that when you have, well, Peter Drucker said this, there's only three things that naturally happen in all organizations: friction, confusion, and underperformance.
Hmm.
Everything else requires leadership. So my main focus is provide the leadership to transform friction into productive conflict, confusion into clarity, and underperformance into high performing teams. But unless you can master having these conversations, is very difficult to do. And that's one more resource is Patrick Lencioni. The five dysfunctions of the team. The first dysfunction is lack of vulnerability based trust. And the second dysfunction is the inability there's the fear of conflict. So that's my main focus.
So let me return to your mentioning of the Rockefeller habits and habit number one about a team that's healthy and alive. When
Yeah.
a leadership team lacks alignment, how do you see that corporate friction sort of cascading down and impacting the momentum of the entire company?
Oh, I heard this, at the top of there's a bottleneck at the top of the bottle.
Yeah.
And so uh, we know that the executive team models the way. And so if you're modeling that and that cascades down into the culture, then that's called cultural entropy. It works against the vision, mission, core values, purpose, BHAG, all that cannot we can't negotiate if the leadership team doesn't embrace how to have these conversations. That has a serious impact on the culture, and you can't keep A players. A players like productive conflict.
And then you mentioned the Pat Lencioni's work with five dysfunctions, and that the fear of conflict is probably a symptom of an absence of trust among that
Yes,
leadership
yeah,
team. And
yes.
so I guess the question becomes, why do you think that highly ambitious executive teams so easily fall into the trap of sort of superficial friendliness instead of having the raw, honest debates that are really required to help them scale an organization?
Sometimes it depends on their behavioral style, maybe their disc style or whatever investments you have. It's maybe more challenging for some styles who are more people focused and seek harmony, but it's false harmony. So think of productive conflict as there's a scale. So you tip it this way, then it's false harmony. You tip it this way, it's destructive. In the middle, it takes some energy to have productive conversations, productive conflict. And again, I think it's just human nature. Even I've had a lot of people say you should change the name of your book because people don't want to have productive conflict. They want to, a lot of folks have the sense of let's just get to the harmony, but it's false harmony. And I think it's just kind of part of human nature. Back to Drucker, three things that naturally happen is friction, confusion, and underperformance. And that requires a level of leadership. Now, most of my clients, I would say, it's not an obvious suffering of lack of conflict that is productive. They usually have it, but I invite them to take it to the next level. And Patrick Lencioni says it requires vulnerability-based trust. So to have an in-the-moment conversation, and it doesn't mean you address the whole conflict right now. You acknowledge, hey, there's an issue. The real challenge for me concerning we're behind schedule is this. What's the real challenge for you, Charlie? Oh, okay. When can we discuss this? Because it seems like it's really impacting me and the team. What can we do to address this issue? So, so the concept that I help leadership teams is just how do you acknowledge the realities, which is vulnerability-based trust, and then beyond your style. If you're a D, you're real direct. If you're an S, maybe you're more people-focused and seek harmony. Regardless of your style, provide a method to regain focus. What's the reality we need to face? Craft a shared vision. What is it that if we could achieve it, what would that be like? Build organizational alignment. All right, we're out of alignment. Let's get in alignment. And then champion execution habits. So my method in working with some powerful leadership teams, amazing entrepreneurs, founders of amazing businesses, is to take it to that next level of best, where there's more vulnerability-based trust, and that they address issues in a way that it's more systematic and less dependent on personality.
And right, and as I mentioned previously, you've written the book, and it's called Accelerate Through Conflict, where you sort of lay out this framework. And I'd like to take a little deeper dive into the method itself, because you note that step one is sort of seizing the moment and regaining focus. So when emotions are running hot in a meeting, how does a leader successfully pivot the room back to a focused state in order to have these meaningful conflict or vulnerable conversations?
So the science of successful leadership goes back to the work of many authors, but one of them is Daniel Goleman. And he wrote the book Leadership That Gets Results. And what he says is that if you're a founder, executive leader, it's very important that you're able to be self-aware and be able to calm your limbic system. And then self-managing is then calming your limbic system, being able then to be better at learning to listen and have empathy for whatever dynamics are going on. And then out of that, have organizational awareness. So the foundation is an emotionally intelligent leader who's self-aware. And so that self-awareness then can help build that vulnerability-based trust, because then if you're self-aware, you recognize, oh, there's a cue where we're out of alignment. We're off track. The numbers aren't adding up. There's some lack of performance. Oh, there's some friction that isn't getting addressed. There's some confusion. So empowering executive leaders to be emotionally self-aware, self-managing, empathetic, and organizational awareness is really at the heart of scaling. That's what I think is hidden within that Rockefeller habit. The executive team is healthy and aligned. Back again to that research by Daniel Goleman, there's 6 styles of leadership. And if your leadership doesn't have an awareness of which style should I use for this situation, then you're missing opportunities to transform the friction, confusion, and underperformance, and provide that kind of leadership that helps you to really scale.
Yeah. And then, as I understand it, step two is remembering the future. And remember in terms of remembering the future to craft a shared vision. And I'm curious as to why anchoring an active conflict in the future is more effective than litigating who was wrong or right in the present.
So there's another author who teamed up with Dr. Goldman. It's Dr. Boyatzis. He's at Case Western Reserve University. They both have found with fMRI studies, literally looking at the brain,
Hmm.
that number one, acknowledging there's a challenge. And I think that that's the first step, acknowledge there's a challenge. And I like that term. I got that from uh, Michael Bengay Stanier in the book, That Coaching Habit. What's the real challenge for us now that we're behind schedule or whatever it might be? Now, remembering the future, crafting a shared vision, what Dr. Boyatzis says is that visionary leaders, that's one of the styles that an executive or owner needs to be able to have, creates what's called a positive emotional attractor, literally lighting up the brain with where are we headed. Now if we look at what's challenging us, where are we headed, there's a gap between the two. And so Dr. Boatzis, in the book, The Science of Change, says it's much more powerful if you understand what's the ideal situation, what's the ideal self of the person, what's the ideal company that we want to create. And that creates a positive emotional attractor. Just trying to be problem focused, you lose being solution focused. Problem
Hmm.
focused is wrestling with the problem, but solution focused is, all right, here's the challenge. First step, let's regain focus. Now let's remember the future. Where are we headed? And that then lights up the brain and makes it much more likely to be able to get past the problem to achieve something that is being blocked.
Yeah, I absolutely love that in terms of being solution focused. The final stages of your process focus on learning from the past in order to
Yeah.
help build alignment and seeking accountability to champion execution. And so, how do we make sure that a resolved conflict actually transforms into long-term behavioral change and concrete execution habits?
Yeah, I think it's the idea is it's like an after action review. Jim Collins did a lot of work with the military, I think, at West Point. And in his book, BE 2.0, just simply outlines what we know all military do. It's an after action review. What replicable learnings can we gain from what went well? What replicable learnings can we gain from what didn't go well? And
Hmm.
out of that, what specific methodical consistent behavior do we need to deploy? So this third step in the moment conversation is, all right, um, what replicable lessons have we learned? And that is such a profound, important step, and often is missing. I know you do a postmortem after some process or some event, but I would encourage everyone to understand the the after action review that I just described, because that provides then a way to look at the situation. So we're not punitive against someone. Hey, you really messed up this process, Sally and Charlie. It's, hey, wow, that didn't go well. What lessons did we learn? And so because of that, we see this gap between here's the challenge, here's the vision. Now we want to fill the gap. And unless you get to that step, again, it's problem focused rather than being solution focused.
That's great. Now that I do want to get back to, you mentioned obviously the work that you've done with Crew Carwash, and this is, a car wash business, and
It's a car wash, right?
it's a car wash business.
It's
You coached their leadership team, helping them obviously scale immensely, and as you mentioned, land a historic spot on Glassdoor's best places to work list. So I'm curious just to dig into this sort of case study. How did implementing productive conflict turn, what is a historically high turnover industry into an employee magnet where people love to
yeah.
work and want to keep working at?
I give a lot of credit to Bill Dom. He's a second generation owner. He kept alive the purpose of the business. His father, Ed, and his brother Joe founded it. And anyway, Bill's now my age; he's in his 70s. And on the wall, when you walk into Crew Carwash, it says, "We're in the people business. It just so happens we wash cars."
Hmm.
So it's they already have a strong purpose and a people focus for this business. Secondly, the third generation is Sally Grant, and that's Bill's daughter. They here is a father and daughter working side by side with the COO, who is an award-winning CEO, Billy uh, Shaming, and they would battle with one another before I got there. They and we just refined their ability to battle. They already knew how important it is to not let things pass, to address issues when they came. So when I started working with them in 2014, by 2019, I would say a lot of what I learned was from them. So I would just say that they brought a lot to it. Then I was able to reframe it for them and to realize, hey, wait, when we're having conflict, when is it destructive and when is it false harmony? And so I just refined their process. And then they drove that down into the culture so that they have some tunnels where they do the interior of the cars. And I was there getting my car interior washed, and I was just watching them, do their thing. They didn't know who I was. It was amazing to see that there was, two people discussing something about keeping this moving, and someone was behind schedule, but how they handled it was beautiful. They addressed the issue. I call it an in the moment conversation, and they were mainly positive. Hey, we're in order for us to stay on track, we're off track. The challenge for me is I can't get my job unless you do yours. And the other person then they just had a dialogue and they resolved the issue. So they brought a lot to this. And I would say that they also do strategic culture alignment, that they model the way that everyone in the culture feels free to have this vulnerability based trust. Hey, we're in the people business. Let's treat each other as teammates, and let's stick together and resolve issues together.
So you kind of touched upon one of my follow-up questions was going to be, it's one thing to get a handful of C-level executives to trust each other, but it's another thing to cascade that throughout an entire frontline culture of people who are actually washing the cars and
Yeah.
vacuuming the interiors, as you said. And so I'm just curious, was there something intentional or something about their process in terms of training store managers and those frontline workers to embrace that in the moment conversation framework? I know you witnessed it, but how did they really successfully cascade that down from the C suite all the way to every single frontline employee?
Rigorous training.
Yeah.
There was a book written, Telling Ain't Training.
Okay.
And so most mid-market firms tell people what to do, they don't train them. So Crew is exceptional at training. Training means you sweat a little bit. You have to prove you've learned it. So their onboarding and training is absolutely phenomenal. And I'm not even sure they even use my terms. So at some point, they don't say, well, let's have an in the moment conversation. They just do it. They don't have to have the theory of this guy that wrote this book. It's just a part of the culture. And even the regional managers, the district managers, and the managers at the store, again, they're not caught up in theory. It's just a culture that works. And when you have a culture that works and it's systematic training, uh, ongoing coaching, and reinforcement by the senior team, they go see the work. I mean, they are not hanging out in their offices. They're traveling. They're alongside these folks. And another way that they reinforce it, Eugene, is they have something called CrewTube.
Hmm.
CrewTube is every week. They have a full-time videographer, and they're producing a video about how to handle situations with your teammates, how to handle situations with someone driving their car, and how is that we improve the experience. And so they are at the top of the heap as far as equipping a culture to know that all their core values resolve problems, and that everyone is accountable to hold others accountable. But for crew, feedback feels like support.
Mm-hmm.
It's really amazing. And again, I give them the credit. I just kind of hang in there with them now at this point as they're really scaling. And I continue to provide the coaching and help them to really continue to nurture this culture that works in such a way that the core values help to resolve the problem. So it's not personalities, it's the system, it's systematized.
It almost sounds like feedback is not criticism, but actually empowerment.
Yes, that's what they seek to do. They
Yeah.
seek to support one another. And again, remember, feedback is, hey, you did a great job. Thanks for doing that. So they give a lot of positive feedback. As a matter of fact, the research on discretionary effort says giving positive feedback as soon as you can when something is done well is way more effective than catching someone doing something wrong.
Right. To close out, Craig, if a CEO is listening to this right now and sort of wants to gauge the health of his or her leadership team when it comes to productive conflict, what is the ultimate litmus test that they could run this week to see if their team is hiding from conflict or sort of leaning into trust and accountability?
Hmm. So the ultimate litmus test probably would start with the founder, CEO, executive leader, that they then kind of in the middle of a leadership team meeting, ask this question: what is the real challenge for you this week? What is the real challenge for you? Start with that because that sometimes sets in motion a different conversation. The second thing they could do is once they have everyone describe the challenge, then ask them, what would be the ideal situation if we could achieve it? What would that look like? And then have everyone describe that and then just say, well, what's the gap between the challenge we have and where we want to go? Let's have a conversation. What's that gap and what new habits do we need to address or build up that we can fill the gap so we can achieve our ideal situation for a company or our ideal self as leaders. So I think it starts with that magical question I got from Michael Bengay-Stanier. What is the real challenge for you now? I remember,
Um,
yeah, one more real brief. So I had
yeah.
one leadership team that was doing an assessment. How are we doing with conflict? And when I asked that, what the first question I asked was, what do you cherish about your work? And they all said, oh, it's a family business. It's been here 40 years. It's a great place to work. And then when I brought up the question, what is the real challenge for you now? It was silence. And the HR director said, look, we love working here, but we don't really speak up. We can't really share what we're really thinking. And so that is a very powerful question. What is the real challenge for you now? And just listen. If you're the CEO or founder, just listen.
Awesome. For those of you that want to learn more about Craig, obviously you can check out his book. Again, the title is Accelerate Through Conflict. We will include a link to the book in the episode notes. You can check out his website at culturesthatwork.com. Craig, we always like to finish the session by asking you, is there a book that you're currently recommending that all of your business coaching clients read these days?
David Epstein, Inside the Box.
Okay.
It's very powerful tool. I think it reinforces the book we used to recommend called The Goal. We still recommend that. It's the theory of constraints. Be in the constraint. Don't avoid the constraint. Dive into the constraint. Be in the box because out of the constraints can come amazing new ideas and creativity. And it's an incredible book. He's a New York Times bestselling author. And so it's a very powerful way to think about addressing issues. What is the constraint? And diving into the constraint, we can learn so much more to be creative and create something we couldn't have done if we hadn't been inside the box.
I know that 20 years of coaching has probably taken you to lots of wonderful places around the world. I was just wondering if you have a favorite place to visit that you'd
Sedona,
recommend
Arizona.
to others.
Yeah, Sedona, Arizona. I go there. We've spent a few Christmases there actually. And it's a sublime place where you can quiet your mind. I think having a quiet mind is critical. So go climb some of those rocks around Sedona, and breathe in the fresh breath of God, and just be fully present and engaged. That would be my
Awesome.
recommendation.
And then my final question that I ask everyone, and this is a little one that's close to my heart. If there was a musical act or a band that you have never seen live in concert that you wish you could, who would that be and why?
Wow. Well, I'm going to go back in history. I wish I could have been live with the Beatles. I mean, it's kind of weird, but that's my first response. I
That
actually
is not
went to
not weird at all.
I went to a conference with or a concert with the Who in Muncie, Indiana at one point, but that's who I had a rock and roll band when I was in high school, so we played a lot of Beatles music, and our band was called the Chosen Ones. Uh, it's also a perspective because three of the six have passed away, so it really gives me a sense of really cherishing those memories. So that's where I would go.
That's fantastic. And just for my education, did you play an instrument or were you the
I
singer in
played
the
the
band?
bass. I was a bass player. Yeah, so yeah, I could shake the room usually with bass. And a big bass amplifier. So yeah,
Awesome. Craig, always a pleasure talking with you. I appreciate you taking the time for
yeah,
sharing the information about working through conflict and how conflict can actually be a good thing in a business if you
yeah,
face it head on and don't avoid it.
yeah.
Again, always a treat. And I thank you so very much for your time. I hope
Thank
you
you,
have a
Eugene.
wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Many blessings, and everyone can be their best by bringing out the best in others. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.